Pisco looks like an absolute jackass once again on the timcast. Pisco, who is a tedious lunatic lefty, came on to debate a conservative lawyer and turned up the jackassery all the way to 10.
So the allegations are that he's aligned with Hamas. So I guess we're going to go back to this. Isn't Hamas a terrorist organization?
Yeah. Are you allowed to support a terrorist organization in terms of your vocal support? Are you allowed to go down in the street and say, I love Hamas?
I actually don't know. Are you?
Are you trolling me? I have to know.
No, I'm being 100% serious because again, that's a terrorist organization.
I know that you're allowed to, as a citizen, vocally support reprehensible and terroristic organizations.
If this is just purely he's just aligning himself and it's not crossing any lines or anything, then yeah, okay, I agree that it's wrong.
Boom, I think we agree. And so what's your deal with me? Why are you hate my appearance on Tim Pool?
You know, if that's purely just what's going on, then I guess, you know, the things I said about that case, I guess I take back.
Hey folks, please like, comment, and subscribe. And make sure to check out my newsletter. Information is in the description.
Yeah, so my name is KEWL Vic, and I have a YouTube channel under the same name, KEWL Vic. I watch like debates or I do like political commentary on videos and such, and so here we are, because I did one on Pisco, on the Tim Pool, on the Timcast he did recently, and I'm taking it Pisco wasn't too pleased with it, so here I am.
I thought, well, I'm going to be honest. So when I saw it, I think that there's a potential maybe for us to have some common ground. I'm hoping that's the case. And yeah, I obviously, I think we probably will disagree on some things. But I'm going to see where you're at, where we're at, and see if we can agree on some stuff with respect to the immigration issue. So for those of you who didn't watch my appearance on there, it was mostly a conversation about Mahmoud Khalil and his arrest and attempted deportation. And essentially, to what extent is this even a First Amendment issue? Does the government have the right to do this? Is it morally correct for them to do it? And any kind of like ancillary thing out of that. Is that like more or less your take on what the topic's about?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would say, yeah.
So why don't we start with like our relative positions? So see, like and we don't have to like relate everything to your video or to the actual conversation we had with Tim Pool. I'm curious in your actual thoughts. I think this is a clear First Amendment issue. And I recognize that there are a lot of powers the government has over non-citizens. And these powers have, it's almost like you could say in many ways a plenary authority, an authority to deport anyone for any reason. And that authority has been recognized in precedent with respect to certain acts that we've had in the past that make people deportable. And so I absolutely recognize the fact that it is the precedent of the Supreme Court and the law of the land that people who are not citizens do not have a substantive right to be in this country. And I also agree, by the way, that non-citizens do not have the same rights as citizens in this country, both in the context of the First Amendment and in other contexts. So I think on all that stuff, you'd probably agree with me, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
Notwithstanding those things, I do think it's a First Amendment issue. And I'm curious what your take, and I do think that what's going on with Mahmoud Khalil is not just bad, it's dangerous, and it's dangerous for Americans. But I'm curious, what's your take on all that? What's your take on Mahmoud Khalil and everything?
So, I don't really know a lot of details about it, but just from what I know, because correct me if I'm wrong, but they haven't really like announced officially what they have them charged with, right? Like detained for, like they haven't released official reasons, have they, or no? Yeah,
they have. So what they did is
what were the reasons?
So they issued a notice to appear, and then they issued a revised notice to appear. These are charging documents. They're equivalent of like a criminal complaint in the criminal context, but basically DHS gives you a bunch of allegations, like pleadings. They're actually called pleadings, like they would in a criminal complaint. And they've set out the base allegations. It's very short. It's like, you are a citizen of Egypt, originally from Syria, whatever, right? And then allegation number 2, you got your green card at this date. Allegation number 3, so it's like a list of basically 4 allegations, and they cited the statute that makes him, in their minds, deportable, which is INA 237 little a sub 4 Roman numeral 3 sub C, I believe. And I can tell you what that is, but they have specifically pointed to a base of deportability, and just recently they amended it and added a new one. And in addition to the basis that I just described to you, which is related to national security, or not really national security, more foreign policy interests, they've also accused him of being deportable for having been inadmissible at the time that he was admitted, on the basis of an allegedly misrepresenting green card application. But we can talk about those two bases. So yes, there are rationales for that they've provided on paper.
Yeah, because that's one thing that I read, that he didn't disclose he was part of certain groups or something. When he was, I think, applying for the green card, he didn't, I don't remember what groups, but he didn't disclose he was part of some groups, and that's okay. Yeah, which ones were they?
So they accused him of not disclosing in prior. They want me to try. You're pretty loud on mine. Okay, perfect. I'm turning you down just a bit, but you're loud. Don't worry, you're coming in clear. They accused him of not reporting the fact that he worked for UNRWA, which is basically does a bunch of help for Palestinians, and then not disclosing, in their minds, additional work for, now I'm not remembering the exact office or the exact country that he worked in their embassy or something for an additional period of time. So it's basically, they're accusing him of materially misrepresenting, and I can talk about why it's all bullshit, the times of his employment and his employment with UNRWA, this UN agency, resettlement agency thing. But that's the alleged misrepresentation on his green card. Needless to say, I think both rationales are complete dog shit, but we can get into that.
Okay. All right. So basically, so is the fear that if they send him back, is it fear that they're going to come after like natural born citizens, or what's the big hysteria here?
Yeah. So I would say there's there's 3. Number 1, I think on its own terms, it's bad because this one individual, in my opinion, is being deprived of rights that he has. Now, you might disagree with that, but that's just, step 1 is I think it's bad in the actual case, in that it's indicating that the administration, or it's evidence, in my opinion, the administration is willing to deprive an individual, one person, in this case, Mahmoud Khalil, of his First Amendment rights. And that by itself is, in my opinion, bad. Number 2, I think that it has implications on the administration's policy in other non-immigration areas with respect to Israel. And this, I mean, not taking one side of the issue, Israel versus Palestine at all, but just saying that, for example, it portends that there are going to be more actions against private universities who don't crack down on these kinds of protests, or on law firms who represent these kinds of people. So I think it indicates a posture against First Amendment principles, whether or not it's legally against the First Amendment. It's showing a lack of a desire to embrace the fact that people are allowed to think differently in this country, including on major issues like Israel versus Palestine, or on, America's foreign policy, that kind of thing. And that can manifest itself, yes, at, private actors, including universities, who are now having to, bear having ICE agents going all through their halls, people going through social media accounts of people on student visas to make sure there's no, protests, that kind of thing. Those things, though you might not know it, do chill speech. And Americans, whether or not you think that, we'll get into it, green card holders or student visa people have First Amendment rights. I believe they do, but when they're inside the country, citizens have a right to speak and also to hear. There's a right to speak, and there's a right to receive information that's implicated. So I think that number 2 rationale is kind of a broader portent or omen about the administration's policy that's being borne out in other areas against the First Amendment. And then number 3 is the direct legal potential cost, which is any First Amendment ruling, if it goes the wrong way. In my opinion, there is a right and wrong way, but I can't predict with this court. If this ruling goes too far, there are implications on even citizens' direct First Amendment rights, which is, imagine the court were to sanction and say, for this kind of rationale that the Secretary of State determines it's contrary to American foreign policy interests, that's a category, a First Amendment exception category. And I think that that's probably a lower chance probability. I think the Supreme Court's going to probably do the right thing here. That said, if they were to go that route, you never really, it's not easy to predict how these things are going to hash out. It could be that they rule exclusively on immigrant grounds or kind of immigrant exceptional ground with respect to the First Amendment, but you can't predict it. And once that precedent gets stuck in stone, if it is precedent that gives greater latitude for the government to use national security or foreign policy rationales on First Amendment grounds, then that could directly apply to citizens in ways that are unforgivable. So I gave you enough to chew on.
Okay. Well, listen, on principle alone, like if this is just purely they don't like what he's saying about Israel or Palestine and stuff, then on principle alone, I completely agree with you. I don't think that he should be punished. And even if they try to use legalese or something, try to find legal ways that they could punish him or something like that. Obviously, on principle alone, I don't think that's right.
Well, I appreciate you saying
with that said.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry. You can go ahead and finish.
No, actually, I forgot what I was going to say. So go ahead.
No worries. No, I think that's a great thing to say because I think it's very obvious, and even Tim Pool said in our conversation that that's exactly what they're doing. And if that's exactly what they're doing, regardless of the legalities, it sounds like you would be against it. And I think that it's very clearly what they're doing is trying to target people because of their speech, and they're not even hiding it. We can get into the rationale of the alleged material misrepresentation, and I'm happy to get into that with you and explain why it's all bullshit and pretext. But that alone, I think that's problematic.
So now here's a question, because the only case that I've heard about this so far is with this Mahmoud guy. Is this going on elsewhere? Is there a lot of people that are speaking out against Israel and they're getting arrested or threatened with deportation? Is this happening? It is. Okay, well, like what?
So there's a professor, an Indian professor. It's actually at a very prestigious university. It might be Harvard. He has already been put in deportation proceedings. There was a woman out of Boston. She wrote an article that was critical of Israel. She's been already arrested and picked up. She's in habeas, but there's been an order. I think it's a habeas order in Massachusetts telling her to go. There's one person who's already quote unquote self-deported because they were denied some amount of relief in a court, and they just didn't want to go through the trouble of staying in prison this whole time. So his case is now moot, and he's left the country. Student visas, I think Marco Rubio has now just said something like 300 student visas have been revoked on this basis. So at least 4 or 5 active deportation proceedings, if not more. Some of green card holders, some of student visas, and hundreds allegedly have been revoked. There are reports of people being like saying that their university hasn't even been told. So it's chaos out there. It's happening and it's widespread.
Okay. Well, so Pisco, listen, I would love to take you at your word, but the thing is though, is that, listen, not to like generalize or judge here, but it's just that I feel that sometimes when I get these stories from people, and by the way, actually, maybe I should get this out of the way first. Do you identify as being on the left or?
I would, yeah.
Like
I think at this point, yeah, I would say left.
Okay, so yeah, just judging from my things, I'll hear these stories from people on the left, and it seems like it's over sensationalizing, kind of like it's over just fear mongering. You know what I mean? And so, listen, I would love to sit here and say, you know what, Pisco, that's terrible, and I agree, this is horrible. But I think before we get to that, I would like to know your stances on. So, for instance, you say you're afraid this might come down on actual citizens. Has there been cases in the past where they've come down on citizens for free speech?
Yes.
Like what?
So, for example, in the early, this is pre-Brandenburg days, but in the 1920s, 1919s. This is in World War One era. There was case law that was generated vis-a-vis distribution of communist leaflets. And people who are against the war, involvement in the war. A very famous case called Schneck. That's the fire in a crowded movie theater reference by Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes. So in that case, and that was pretty, in my opinion, awful precedent from the court. The Schneck case, which initially was applied to anarchists, to communists. And it really maintained itself for really until Brandenburg in the 60s as basically anyone advocating abstract something that the government considered to be seditious or advocating violence in the abstract, right? Not saying directly now do this. The standard for incitement was like very, very low, and people were wiretapped, people were arrested. I don't know if you know about the candidate for president from the Socialist Party is a guy named Debs. He was running for president from jail based on some of the attacks on the First Amendment. There were justices who were against it and were principled at certain points, and it started to grow and grow and become untenable until we get the Brandenburg Standard, which is famous now in the 60s. It basically says you need imminent call for lawless action. But yeah, for a lot of these cases also involved aliens and non-citizens, where, for example, there's this case, Heresitis v. Shaughnessy, where they were trying to bring over a professor, or there was someone who's excluded at the border because they had a communist affiliation, and these First Amendment cases intertwine and are, with each other, and they created bad precedent. And so, yeah, I think that you don't know where these cases are going to develop, where they're going to go. And yes, there have been intrusions on the First Amendment on U.S. citizens, and especially in areas of national security, especially post Patriot Act, right? Post, all of our experience in the Iraq War and Afghanistan War. Talk about like the revelations. I don't like Edward Snowden, but the revelations of the NSA and wiretapping, and even in Trump's case, right? The FISA warrant abuse that I think it's overblown, but the FISA warrant, what happened with him and the Carter Page, it's really not Trump, it's Carter Page, but it was his campaign, right? The Carter Page FISA warrants. These are concerned. Every American should be concerned about individual rights. And whenever the government is arguing from a basis of national security and foreign policy, I feel very weird of this trust us rationale and of individual rights when it comes to those kinds of rationales.
No, absolutely. I actually agree with you 100% there. Other cases that, you brought up about like the communist scare back, in the 19th century, like another famous case was Lucille Ball. Remember, like they thought she was like a communist, and they were like kind of, it was like threatening kind of like cancellation with that and stuff, because, they thought she was a communist.
I wasn't aware of that.
There's also like, oh, wow. Yeah, really. It was kind of famous, but like, there was also the comedian Lenny Bruce, like he would get arrested for making racy jokes on stage and such,
Carlin.
And so those, George Carlin. So, clearly, these are government overreach when it comes to free speech. But I'm curious though, can you think of any examples? Can you think of within the last few years or so?
Of First Amendment violations within the last few years?
And it doesn't necessarily mean like the government arrested for someone for saying something, but maybe there was like a crackdown, or maybe they used social media or something like that to maybe crack down on people's speech.
So if you're referencing what occurred on like platforms like Twitter and Facebook under previous management, now I don't think that those policies would be set in stone, given Elon Musk and Zuckerberg's at the White House, right? But yeah, I don't consider those to be First Amendment violations for reasons related to First Amendment doctrine. So I can explain those. Before you do, like, you don't think that, for instance, I don't remember if it was the CIA or the FBI going up to Zuckerberg and saying, "Hey, don't allow posts about the laptop story because that's information," and then them going and censoring that, and then I believe they did a poll, and there's some people that believed that. Well, what did they say then? So what happened? What's alleged by Zuckerberg is that the FBI had these communication channels with Facebook, and that they said specifically that there were threats from Russia. That much is true. the FBI told them to be on the lookout for potentially stories that are problematic about the Bidens and specifically Hunter Biden. That's months and months and months before what happened. And let me tell you why I think that occurred, and why I think it makes complete and total sense. At the time they were giving those warnings to Facebook, there was a Russian affiliated individual who was charged. His name is Smirnov, who was trying to feed the Department of Justice a fake story that the founder of Burisma, Mykolaiv Zlochevsky, actually bribed the Bidens. He was indicted for that, and based on his communications in 2020 and before that. And so it made perfect sense for the FBI, who was A, aware of him, B, aware of all the other people who were peddling that same narrative that came from Russia. It literally came from Russia about Hunter Biden, Burisma, that kind of thing. This was well known to the FBI at the time, and those kinds of general warnings that, hey, Russia might try to spin something about the Bidens. Not only was it completely true, that they literally tried to do it with this guy Smirnov, where he was literally indicted for that very action. But it's also completely unconnected to the Hunter Biden laptop story, which, was months and months later. There was never any communication from the FBI saying you should censor anything, and there was never any specific communication about the laptop itself.
There was never any communication about the laptop. They never mentioned the laptop whatsoever. They just did a blanket statement that was just like, oh, just watch out for potential Russian false stories. That's all that was.
Yeah.
So would the laptop fall under potential Russian false stories, though?
Let's just... is the laptop a potential Russian false story? I do want to answer that question. So, for instance, just before you answer it, so if the FBI went to Facebook and said, yeah, watch out for these false Russian stories, and then they see this laptop story breaking out, I mean, even under everything you're saying is 100% correct, wouldn't they want to be safe and be like, we better censor this laptop story and then do it? Potentially, but just to be, what you're asking me, wouldn't Facebook want to do that? Potentially. Facebook, by the way,
because of the FBI. The FBI told them about these Russian fake stories.
Well, I don't know if it's a specific...
It wasn't just under their own volition.
Hang on a second. So I don't understand. You're asking me whether they would be incentivized to... They're not accused of outright censoring the story. Facebook is accused of, and credibly, and it's true, that they deprioritized sharing for a few days or something of the laptop story. 100%. That's... that they've admitted to doing that. But you're asking me, would they be more inclined to do it given the warning? I think the answer is yes. They would also be more inclined to do it given, the eventual statement by those former FBI officials. But those statements by the former FBI officials aren't First Amendment violations. Neither is a general warning months and months in advance of something that was absolutely happening, and which was that the Russians were absolutely peddling disinformation about the Bidens and literally lying to FBI agents about this story about Zlochevsky on the very matter that the Republicans were up in arms about, which is the Burisma matter. And so before we get into that, I just can we acknowledge that Mark Zuckerberg says that the FBI never told him to censor that that laptop story, that Mark Zuckerberg acknowledges that this warning was a generalized warning months and months earlier, and see that you can prove nothing, that the FBI expected this laptop story to come out in the first place, such that they would be on notice about when it was going to come out, when they were going to give the warning. I mean, the laptop story came out because it was leaked to the New York Post by Trump's team. And so in what sense do we expect the FBI to be unaware when this laptop story is going to come out? They had no idea about it until they actually got they got the laptop from the laptop repair guy, the FBI did, but they didn't know another copy was going to Giuliani to be leaked to the New York Post. And so that all occurred after the generalized warning was given to Facebook, and you guys have kind of invented a narrative around it based on innuendo.
Okay, so
what about what I
here's
just said?
The thing, though,
do you not agree with anything I just said, or what part of what I said does not strike
you? Say a lot, so
okay.
What part do you want me to agree with you on?
I would like you to agree with me that the warning given by the FBI was months and months before the actual laptop story that occurred in October.
I would need to verify that on
All right,
myself. I mean, I'm not just gonna sit here and just be like, yeah, man, whatever you tell me, I'm just gonna believe it.
All right, so let's get some base facts, right? Like, so this is the Hunter Biden laptop. Boo-doo-doo. And this is the warning that Facebook, that Zuckerberg said, that the FBI had warned Meta about a potential Russian disinformation operation.
And where are you reading this from?
This is from the New York Post. That the FBI had warned Meta about a potential Russian disinformation operation related to the Biden family and Ukrainian energy giant Burisma, which, by the way, was literally happening. So I guess that's an easy one to start off with first. Do you agree that Russia was peddling a false story about the Bidens and Burisma in 2020? And that's the Smirnov allegation. So that's a Smirnov
I actually
indictment.
never heard about that. So
never heard
I
of
guess
Alexander
if you're
Smirnov?
reading that, then sure.
So
Yeah, I never heard about that story.
So Alexander Smirnov, and this is from NBC News, a former FBI informant whose false claims about President Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden were at the heart of the Republican impeachment inquiry against the president has now been indicted additionally on tax charges. Alexander Smirnov, the former FBI informant charged with lying to the FBI about President Joe Biden and his son Hunter. So this is about the new indictment. But anyway, so he was indicted for lying to the FBI about Burisma and saying that Mykolaiv Zlochevsky was bribing the Bidens. Did you remember that FT 1023 that was like the Chuck Grassley and other people were saying, here's a smoking gun, that the Bidens were paid off by Burisma? All that was a lie and invented by someone who's accused by the Department of Justice of being a Russian agent. And there's like photo evidence of all the shit, and the timelines match up perfectly. And so that's probably why the Department of Justice, why the FBI was concerned about the Russian operatives trying to plant a false narrative about the Burisma and the Bidens. I guess I'll ask this in a hypothetical form. I know people get a bit really frustrated at that. But if it were the case that they knew this at the time they gave that warning, wouldn't that be the responsible thing to do? If they were aware that this guy...
The Burisma thing?
So the hypothetical is as follows. If it's true, if what I'm telling you is true, that there was this guy, Alexander Smirnov, that he was working on behalf of Russia, that he was planting with the Department of Justice a lie about Biden's being bribed by the Burisma founder, Mykolaiv Zlochevsky. If that was the case, wouldn't it be responsible for the Department of Justice to alert private partners such as social media organizations? Wouldn't that be the responsible thing to do?
I mean, in principle, sure, but I mean, there's a lot of false stories that are put out about Trump all the time, like on the internet, and no one's taking those down. There's a lot of lies people still believe today, and no one's taking those down.
We're not talking about taking
so. I
down.
mean, even if on principle,
we're not talking about taking down. We're saying, like, should they talk to the social media organization? Should there be a back and forth between those organizations? Because I'm telling you right now, like, Trump right now and Elon Musk are working very closely to peddle certain information on their social media platforms. Sometimes I think outright lies, but they're informing each other about stuff that's going on, and they're releasing government information, and hell, they're leaders of the FBI. They're literally social media influencers with Dan Bongino and Kash Patel. And so it doesn't seem like you have a principled problem against the government working hand in hand with social media organizations.
Okay, well, do you have a principal problem with it? So if Trump was doing the exact same thing, and let's say that you don't. So if Trump went to Elon Musk and said, hey, well, who's to say what's done in good faith? I don't know if Joe Biden did what he did in good faith. You will. So it's just all based on what you feel, or...
Wait, I will assess whether or not I feel something is a good faith or not. But in principle, no, I don't have a problem with the government talking to private actors so long as they're not coercing them, which Trump is doing right now with other actors, not necessarily in the social media space, but so long as they're not coercing them. Do you have a principled problem with...
Okay, so this is my whole issue with, and I don't know if you got this from my video, Pisco, is that we have to listen to you guys lecture us and finger wag at us and talk to us about principles, but clearly it doesn't seem like you follow your own principles. So why should we go for you? So even if I were in principle, be like, yeah, Pisco, you're right. You know, like I don't agree with that. Why should I concede with you when you're clearly
What
like
principle
don't
am I
even
violating?
follow a lot of your own principles?
Wait, what principle am I violating here?
So let's rewind a little bit.
Yeah.
So so you're talking about colluding, and you're talking about how so you pretty much you asked me about the principles of like, well, and then you throw all this stuff at me like, oh well, Trump's colluding with Elon Musk, Trump's blah 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 blah. And I'm like, well, okay, so wait a minute. Do you think that's wrong then?
For Trump to talk to a social media company and give them warnings? No, I don't think that government interaction with social media is illegitimate. I don't. And what I have a problem with is like Trump taking steps to like coerce private actors. For example, when he's trying to coerce private law firms, or when he's trying to coerce universities and like threaten to withhold security clearances and endowments so that they listen to him on free speech stuff. That's very different from having kind of a arm's length informative relationship where it doesn't reach the aisle of like coerced government activity. I think that's very, very different. And if Trump wants it, I'm telling you right now, right? And I know that these conversations are happening. If Trump wants to tell Elon Musk, hey, we have a security threat from Iran and you should be aware because they're trying to hack into people's individualized accounts, why would I have a problem with that if he's just providing information? What's different is if it's coercive. But there's nothing that people have pointed to of the government interacting with social media companies during this period that at all meets any kind of reasonable standard for coercion. So there's no principle that's been violated.
So listen, you're trying to gaslight me, because the thing is, we all know that all the social media companies were working to censor certain stories, and then they would smear it as fake news, and then months later it would come out, oh, actually, yeah, it was true. And so, listen, don't try to sit here and gaslight me and tell me, yeah, no, there was no any type of coercion, no working with the government. Like, again, you're trying to make me feel like I'm crazy. And the thing is that like, no, we all I didn't say you said, I'm just saying you're trying to make me feel like this is what like kind of irritates me, is that you act like you don't see any of this. Like when we say, hey, like there's a lot of like stories against the Bidens that are getting suppressed or censored or like or slapped as fake news, then you say like, whoa, and then you make excuse after excuse after excuse. So I ask again, like, Pisco, why should I like listen to you and your finger wagging about anything that Trump's doing? How do I know it's coming from a place of legitimate truth and not just because you have some kind of like Trump derangement syndrome or you just want to fear monger? Because listen, I watched one of your videos recently where you're talking about how Trump could do a third term, right? Yeah. Now, in principle, I don't want Trump to have a third term, okay? And I consider that being pretty fair, even though I'm a Trump supporter. I am MAGA. I am sitting here saying I don't want him to have a third term. Now, you said, well, I have to be fair in principle, but all you really did was just say, well, technically through loopholes, he could do this. But I don't think that's really you being fair. That's just you saying he could figure out loopholes, and you're kind of fear-mongering your audience, like, oh, he could have a third term. And bottom line is, I would ask if any Democrat president or whatever, like Joe Biden, let's say Joe Biden got elected a second term, and he talked about, I'm going to have a third term. Would you be pro that, or would you be against that?
Totally against it. I'm against Obama running again. Because whether or not I think that there are, just because I'm giving my honest take on the constitutionality and legality of something that my audience wants to hear from me. They want to hear my genuine take, right? So, for example, I think that Donald Trump is constitutionally ineligible to hold office even now, and that right now the presidency that he's assumed is of no accord. Now, he might there are doctrines about why the things he are doing are still sort of in place while he's ineligibly holding office. But I've been upfront about my opinion on Section 3 of the Constitution, and I think that Trump is not eligible to hold office right now, and that his acts are ultra virus. That means that they're inauthentic. He's not really holding the office. He's a pretender. But I'm just going to give you my authentic belief based on the law. And so when I hear what Trump's position is on whether or not legally there are methods to get a third term, that's been my position on that clause of the 22nd Amendment for literally years. I've talked about it on stream before. And so when I come out and say, yeah, I agree that this is something that's in the text of the Constitution, there's no way, that I'm just doing it to fearmonger to to like the people who watch me. If anything, I would read the room and I would just pander to them and say, he's trying to do everything illegal. Why would I just put myself out there for criticism? You should see the responses there. They're all kind of negative at me. So I'm not, there's no benefit that I'm getting. There's no kind of malicious mindset that I have in just saying my authentic opinion. And B, like the opinion speaks for itself. If you think that it has any value, you can listen to it and see if you agree with it or not. Whether or not you agree that he should run for a third term, I think I made it clear that I think it would be authoritarian and wrong for him or Obama or Biden or anyone to run for a third term. But this conversation has now kind of transformed from the issues into like, how can I trust you, Pisco? How do I know that you're a good person or that you're consistent? As opposed to like, even imagine that I wasn't consistent, that I was a total hypocrite. My opinion would speak for itself, and that you would still need to address it. Notwithstanding the fact that I was a hypocrite. Now, because I think I'm approaching this conversation in good faith, I'm happy to address your criticisms, the allegations of double standards, and I also happen to know a lot about the cases that you're bringing up, which I think should speak to the fact that I am good faith, the fact that I'm willing to apprise myself and learn about these cases, learn about Smirnov, learn about the allegations, from Zuckerberg, these emails sent from, what's this guy's name? Elvis Chan or whatever this guy's name was, who was like the head of trust and safety, read all the Twitter files. I've done that work because I want to stay informed. I think that's a good faith thing to do. And I'm willing to have this conversation on me and whether I'm a good person, whether I'm a hypocrite. But I also think it's far afield of the actual First Amendment discussion. But again, I defer to you.
Okay. So listen, I want to apologize for assigning intent. I shouldn't have done that. But, allegations of you fear mongering, whether I personally believe it's true or not, I don't think it's fair to this conversation to assign intent. So that's I cool. Take that back.
It's all right.
But what I will say though is just it's like, okay, so here's what I would actually want to know. This is what I would actually want to ask you. Because I've seen you and actually I'm not gonna because I actually don't have. Yeah, I do want to try to be good faith here. I am not just coming on here to attack anybody, So what I do want to ask though is like, because people get asked like, and I want to say I think you've done that, but I don't have a concrete memory, so I'm not gonna. But people ask us like, is there anything Trump could do that would make you dislike him, or blah blah blah? Well, I would ask you the question: what are some good things? I'm not saying that make you support him, but what are some positive things that Trump has done that you would say, you know what, that was cool or that was good?
In his first term or second term?
It doesn't matter.
Okay, I think that some of the legislation he passed with respect to the First Step Act, I'm generally in favor. I think that we have over criminalized certain things. That doesn't mean we should be soft on criminality, but I just don't think that there's a need to have the kind of overly punitive measures that sometimes we've put in place. I think that he was probably right on some of these Chinese tariffs. Hence, and Biden continued them, and I'm man enough to admit where I think he's right about that. He did provide military arms, actual munitions, and offensive weaponry to Ukrainians, where before it had been denied to them. This is in his first term. Recently, in the second term, I struggle to think of much of any positive things that he's done.
Okay. Well, that's fair. I'm not looking for you to say anything yet on the second term, just any term. So, okay. All right. Well, that's cool.
But like, let's.
It's just that.
Go ahead. Okay. Go ahead. I mean, like, I'm sitting here, like, let's. I can tell you about other things that I've said that Joe Biden, his preemptive pardons of some of these people, are impeachable. I've said that out loud. I've said that it's corrupt to pardon Hunter Biden. So, I will put up my record in terms of consistency. Another example is I talked about the Her report, and I'm not shied away from those, what's going on in the Her report. I've talked about, Biden's failures. I've said it's corrupt for him to use his immigration power in the last year of his term to try to win an election. I think that was corrupt and wrong. I've been out and people have criticized me for it. I've defended Merrick Garland against Democrats who say that he's too soft because he wanted to go through all the procedures. I've also defended him against Republicans who think he was like authoritarian or something. I think it's delusional. But yeah, I mean, I'm out here. I'm willing to defend stake out my positions, and I think that people should approach them in good faith. And I think it's kind of irrelevant whether or not, frankly, whether or not I am good faith. Now, I happen to believe I am, and again, that's why I'm willing to have this exchange with you. But the real thing is, what about you? Like, here's a First Amendment violation, I think. And regardless of whether or not you think it's a First Amendment violation, you started this by saying, if he's doing it on the basis of speech against this guy, Mahmoud Khalil, you would be against it. You would condemn it. And there's just no good argument that it's not on the basis of his First Amendment or his speech, right? Like even Tim Pool agrees that it's because he spoke out against Israel. No one actually thinks that it's about this alleged misrepresentation on his green card application. No one thinks that. And they've been very open that it's about his alleged alignment with Hamas, which of course relates to his speech. He's not alleged to have done anything criminal. He's not alleged to have done anything that makes him otherwise deportable, except for the green card lie. And so by your own standard, whether or not I'm holding myself to my standard, by your own standard, shouldn't you condemn this attempted deportation of Mahmoud Khalil?
Well, I don't know why I said, yeah, on principle, if it is just about his free speech, I mean, yeah, like I would stand on principle that like, I don't think it's right. But with that said, I don't know like all the details. So like, I mean, they're alleging that he's connected to Hamas. You have any proof that he's not connected to Hamas?
No, they're not.
Didn't you just say that they were?
No,
you just said that they were.
No. The wording used is that he's aligned with Hamas, not that he's in a communication with Hamas. Aligned meaning that his speech is in support of Hamas. First of all, there's nothing that he said that's explicit, that has been alleged or shown to me, is explicitly pro-Hamas in the sense of Hamas is good. Nothing like that, in my opinion, has been produced that's properly attributed to Mahmoud Khalil. But even beyond that, there's no alleged communication or collaboration with Hamas. It's about the speech.
Okay, so I mean, even if he's just aligned with Hamas, I mean, wouldn't that mean that he's pro the like the murdering of Israelites and stuff, like Jews? I mean,
but he's not. Wouldn't. So there are a couple ways.
Well, you're saying he's aligned with Hamas. Isn't that what Hamas? But isn't that what Hamas is all about? Isn't Hamas a terrorist group?
Hamas is a terrorist organization designated as such. The government is accusing him of being aligned with Hamas, but the evidence that they produced of that is flimsy, if anything. Right? It's about the fact that he led this student group in Colombia, and if that's all it takes to be aligned with Hamas, I guess every Palestinian advocate on campus is aligned with Hamas. And then you start to paint with a huge brush. I mean, you might as well say anyone who's pro-Israel supports like the war crimes that not even pro-Israel people can deny that there have been war crimes by Israeli people and IDF against innocent Palestinians. So not even the most staunch pro-Israeli person will say that there have not been atrocities committed and war crimes committed against innocent Palestinians by the IDF. Not even the most fervent. Okay, maybe the most fervent, but not the second most fervent. Just because you support Israel, I would never say, oh, therefore you're aligned with like whoever did the most heinous act, or therefore you're in line with these like messianic settlers who are like stealing people's land. I wouldn't say that just on the basis of their generic support for a cause, or in this case, a ceasefire, right? Or divestment from a university. That's way too far. But even if it were the case, right? Even if it were the case that he explicitly supported Hamas, wouldn't you be against a deportation based on his explicit support for Hamas?
I don't. Well, that's kind of another different area, though. That's like, aligning himself with a terrorist organization, though. Well, that's a little different.
You think it's different? You think it's different? So if someone says, well, MAGA people, they're all terrorists, and the Jan 6ers, they're all terrorists, and so if you say anything MAGA, you must be pro-terrorists. And what if President AOC?
People do believe that.
Okay, but what I'm saying
people
is,
already believe that.
Okay,
though.
People can believe that, but what if the government starts saying, okay, we're designating MAGA?
Joe Biden already said that. I mean, Joe Biden didn't designate us as terrorists. I know. I didn't say that. I know he didn't do that, but he did demonize us, like in that the fiery red background
Hitler speech. He literally didn't. He said that was like he said that there was that the majority of Republicans are like good faith people. That he was warning about
Yeah,
the threat.
Republicans, but MAGA though. MAGA. Yeah, there are never Trump or Republicans, but MAGA though. That's still a lot of American citizens there that he's demonizing. He's demonizing like Americans. You can't deny that. That's if Trump came out and said that this group of Americans.
Well, first of all, Trump comes out and demonizes large groups of people all the time. You agree with that?
Not American citizens?
You don't think so?
No. When did he ever come out and say Democrat voters or he has said some things about Antifa, but Antifa are actually causing destruction. But when has he called like Democrat voters, even like people that are just on the left, like said, oh yeah, they're like a threat to our democracy. They're actual threats.
I don't know what to say at this point. Like, there is so much evidence that practically on a weekly basis, his statements are demonizing Democrats constantly. I mean, it just constantly.
Like now, what? What was the last one he said?
Okay. I mean, I'll just look at his, I'll look to the Trump Twitter account, the Trump Twitter generator. Hang on.
And by the way, I'm not talking about politicians, by the way, I'm talking about the people.
Okay. So, but like what's the quote of Biden? That's the comparison here.
So here's the thing, Pisco. I don't remember all the things off the top of my head. Okay, so you just said we're gonna have a conversation. You didn't tell me what exactly we're talking about, so I didn't really prepare anything. I could go and Google stuff too, but I don't want to waste people's time and just us Googling shit.
Okay, but I want to get to the. Hang on a second. He says not every Republican, not even the majority of Republicans, are MAGA Republicans. Not every Republican embraces their extreme ideology. So he's categorizing a group of Republicans as MAGA Republicans and saying they don't represent the majority of the people.
So what does that mean, though? When he say, well, not everyone is as bad, he's pretty much saying not everyone is as bad as MAGA. So what's he saying about MAGA?
He's saying not all Republicans embrace extreme ideology of
like MAGA.
MAGA Republic. Wait. Would you agree that in your opinion, just your opinion, do you think that most Democrats have a radical ideology, extreme ideology?
No.
You don't think most Democrats have an extreme ideology?
What did you say, Democrats?
Yeah.
No, I don't think most Democrats, but there are a lot of Democrats that have a extreme ideology. Yeah.
Okay, so would you say, for example, let's say the constituency that supports AOC and Bernie Sanders, these people have extreme ideologies that influence people? You would never apply this standard. You guys think Democrats are crazy.
I was going to answer.
Okay,
I was going to answer. Bernie Sanders, not necessarily. I don't think Bernie Sanders preaches anything radical. AOC, on the other hand, is a little bit more radical. So I would say AOC, yes. Bernie Sanders, not really.
Okay, now we're talking about individuals, though. But I'm looking at you, right? Like, most Democrats, by the way, support Trump. Trump's impeachment, right? Most Democrats support some kind of socialized medicine. Most Democrats support tax increases. Most Democrats, so we're talking about a lot of Democrats, maybe not majority, support things that you would consider too far in terms of trans rights. Okay, there are a lot of Democrats who support these kind of things. You would never take an issue with a Republican politician. I'm not even going to stand here, listen to you, and say that you would be upset if a Republican stood up and said, far too many Democrats, radical, crazed Democrats, believe these kinds of things, and they're a threat to the nation. And they replaced Kamala Harris on the ballot, and these crazed Democrats, and there's no way you would take issue with that.
Well, when you talk about replacing Kamala on the ballot, you're more talking about the politician.
Joe Biden. No,
but again, that's talking about the politicians, though.
Okay, but to take the other example,
if you're talking about the people, the thing is, though, is that there are like radical cases of like there are people who have been radicalized on the left. Like you can't tell when there are people just vandalizing random Teslas. You can't tell me that, like, dude, like, okay, when it comes to like right versus left. Like on the right, you have January 6th. That's like our big, oh my goodness, I can't believe they did that. Meanwhile, on the left, it's like, okay, you got like the BLM riots. You got the Tesla stuff. You got like, you know, the protesting
your
outside
opinion, it was
the Supreme Court
widespread,
judges
right?
after Roe v. Wade.
So in your opinion, it was widespread.
And then
right?
you got Antifa. You got Antifa too, who
so in your-
actually
so your-
like
in
took
your opinion, it was
over the
widespread.
block. They took over a city block, Pisco. They took over a city block.
So in your opinion,
Come on, when have like Republicans done that?
So in your opinion, it's a widespread problem, right? You think extreme Democrat ideology is a widespread problem, right?
I actually don't think it's a widespread problem. Because I don't think all Democrats do that.
Neither does
yes,
whoa. Neither does Joe Biden. Joe Biden said not even the majority of Republicans.
But he said MAGA though. MAGA doesn't do that shit, dude. That's what I'm saying. Oh, really? We're going out vandalizing random cars? We're taking over city blocks? What are we doing?
So he said MAGA Republicans. He's almost defining a group of MAGA for himself, right? He's defining in his mind a term of
dude, come on, dude.
Of people.
Dude, come on.
What's come on?
Mr. Good Faith Pisco, man. Dude,
what about what I said is wrong?
But here you are trying to rationalize it again. No, dude, he's saying MAGA are extreme.
Not only
he's saying I'm extreme, Pisco.
So do you identify yourself as a MAGA Republican?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Do you think that Trump should defy court orders?
What do you mean defy court order? Like Joe Biden did with the whole the college loan forgiveness?
I'm asking you a question. Should Trump?
Well, how do you think that was right or wrong?
Whoa. So he never defied orders, but we're gonna get into your consistency. Do you think that Trump should defy court orders? We're gonna get into your consistency.
You're so full of crap.
Wait. Do you think that Trump should defy court orders?
On principle alone, probably not. But the thing is that there are like.
So if he did, would you condemn him?
He's trying.
If he did, would you condemn him?
So here's the thing. Like, he is trying to deport criminals. I'm
not going to answer?
He is trying. I'm answering right now. He's trying to deport criminals, right? And these judges want to stop him. Why do they want to stop him? Is it that is he deporting like the wrong people? Does the judge know like, hey, these people actually shouldn't be deported or something? And he's trying to stop Donald Trump from doing something bad? Or is he trying to infuse his ideology?
That wasn't an answer to the question. Do you even remember
the
question?
Your question then?
Yeah, you don't even remember. So how is that a good faith?
If he defies court orders. So if any wacko judge just says no, then again, if Trump like just defies it, like, and also too, what court orders did he defy?
That's a question. I asked a question. The question
in order to answer yours, in order to properly answer yours, I need to know what court order has he actually defied. Because he actually said that he would listen to the court. So, well, he said he would listen to the court. So what?
In order to know whether or not you will condemn him if he violates a court order, you need to know if he's actually violated a court order. How does that make sense?
Okay. So
how does that make sense?
If he defies, because the thing is though, is like I guess in that case it's not black or white. I guess.
Yeah, I think it's pretty extreme to kind of be toying with this, notion of judicial non-compliance that the president and people and his surrogates are advocating. So yes, I think you are very extreme. I think it's incredibly extreme. But this is all a field of really what we're talking about, which is Biden never designated with any legal consequence a domestic group of MAGA Republicans. But if you were to say something to the effect of, well,
it doesn't matter, dude. He doesn't have to designate. You're already calling me extreme because I said about the court order stuff.
I think you are extreme.
I'm vandalizing cars. I'm having people violent. Go and like.
I didn't say you're.
Am I?
Wait, is Nick Fuentes extreme? Is Nick Fuentes extreme? Is Nick Fuentes extreme? Is Nick Fuentes extreme?
Well, the thing is that what principles do I talk about that's extreme though? What am I promoting that's extreme?
Is Nick
like what am I saying here?
Extreme.
I don't know enough about Nick Fuentes to know if he's extreme or not. I've only gone by what I heard. I've heard he's extreme, but I don't freaking listen to the guy, so okay. I don't know.
Okay, is there who's the most extreme Republican that you know
of? Like politician or just like influencer? Like what are you talking about?
Any person.
Anyone that just identifies as a Republican?
Is Kanye West extreme?
Yeah, he's pretty extreme, but again, what does he actually do though?
That's my point. Just because you're extreme doesn't mean that you are violent or criminal. So when I say you're extreme, doesn't mean that I'm saying that you're vandalizing cars.
Well, okay, wait a minute though. But no, dude, you're labeling me as extreme again. I'm not advocating for people to advocate to destroy cars, though. Is the thing. I'm not advocating for extreme things. You just label Pisco. You're proving my point, dude. You're just labeling us as all extremists.
I'm not labeling you all as extremists, but I think it's
you just did.
How?
Yeah, dude, if you could call me extremist, dude, if you could call me extreme, I know you don't know me personally, but if you could call me extreme, then Christ. I would. You must think Nick Fuentes then is like super extreme, and Kanye West is like mega extreme.
I thought you didn't know anything about Nick Fuentes. You know about Nick Fuentes. Come on, you know.
No, I'm going by what you brought up, Nick Fuentes, and so obviously you think he's extreme if that's the example you brought up.
But how do you know assuming
you must think
Kanye?
He's extreme. I don't know, dude. I don't know.
Okay. Let's calm down. All right. So I want to get us back on track to the First Amendment issue, which is essentially like we're in the situation where
no. Let's go back to the extreme thing because the thing is, you said Kanye West is extreme. Yeah. What does he do that's extreme other than like the things that he says? But what is he actually like?
He says Hitler is good. He sells swastika merchandise. He says the Holocaust, that they're lying about the Holocaust. Do you want me to go on?
Well, see, here's the thing. I guess we should get our definitions of extreme first. Because here's the thing. Who's going out and like actually causing tangible harm because of Kanye's rhetoric? The Democrats have actually caused tangible harm. Again, dude, like how are you glossing over the vandalizing of Teslas, the freaking Chaz incident? Dude, you're sitting here calling me extreme when there are way more people that are extreme on the left.
I didn't say you're the most
Republicans are extreme.
I didn't say you were the most extreme person I've ever met. I just think the extreme is the judicial stuff is a little extreme. I think that's a bit extreme. I think that's extreme. That's extreme. Now, I think the definition point it's a good point from you that we maybe ought to define what we're talking about. When I say extreme, I guess you could use it in one of two ways. Either not usual, that is, it doesn't represent where most Americans are, or you could take a more objective lens in the kind of like political spectrum of different opinions. It's on the far end of one. I would say under both interpretations of the word extreme, on like a kind of objective look at who are the parties that are saying that we should like violate court orders and like not respect the rule of law, it's going to be far left, far right parties who are more authoritarian, or it's, just in the terms of the actual American population, I think most Americans, including Republicans, want Trump to follow court orders. And so I think it's extreme under like both of my usages of those terms. I think it's pretty extreme. And so I also think selling swastika merchandise is pretty extreme. I also think like saying Hitler is good is pretty extreme. I think it's pretty... Okay. Don't you agree? Do you agree with anything that... Everything I said?
Sure, yeah, that's extreme.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's extreme. So all I'm saying is what we're talking about here is a policy.
Wait, hold on. But
you don't want to talk about the First Amendment issue. Okay. We'll do whatever you want. What do you want to ask me?
So, okay.
I think there's a delay. Listen, I'm not trying to interrupt you.
Okay. So, going back to the thing is so by your definition, then you have no problem with calling MAGA extreme because some of us might not care if Trump defies court orders.
I think the ideology of MAGA is extreme, but I don't think every person.
Why though?
Well, I kind of view the MAGA ideology as that which it primarily is espoused by Trump and his major surrogates and influencers. That's what I see as to the extent that there's a through line on MAGA ideology, I view it as a kind of very authoritarian, very anti-Republican, anti-democratic. And so in the ways that I kind of view extremity from the both usage of the term that I just gave you, I view those kinds of tendencies as not in line with the majority of America, and also representing sort of far ends of the objective political spectrum. So I view that ideology as extreme, but I don't think that everyone who is a MAGA supporter is extreme. But also, why are we stuck here? This is
Okay.
This feels very semantic.
Well, no, I think it's a good point because the thing is, you're saying, well, MAGA is very extreme. So if you think MAGA is very extreme because of the things that you brought up, then you must think the Democrats are very extreme then.
No.
So how? How do you, again, so you said like you don't gloss over, but how do you take like the BLM riots, for instance, right? The encourage of violence, like, they're not above encouraging violence and stuff.
Who encouraged violence?
The BLM riots didn't happen. The BLM riots didn't happen.
Do you really think I said that? You think I said the BLM riots
but
didn't
you're
happen?
going. Okay, so did they happen or not?
BLM riots happened.
Okay, and what do you think about that?
I think the riots were bad.
You do.
I've called Chaz an
And do you
insurrection.
think the Democrats? Do you think Democrats? Do you think Democrats did enough to try to, and the mainstream media did enough to try to deter people from violence?
Whoa! You said encourage violence, bro.
Huh? I said deterred.
No, you said encourage. You said the Democrats encouraged violence.
Well,
Do you believe they did or
listen,
not?
again,
Yes or no?
because
Yes or no? Yes or no? Do you
I
believe they
do.
encourage violence?
I do believe that they encourage violence, but like, here's the thing. Again, I don't have the list of all examples right here. Okay, and again, my memory, it's not the best. So here's the thing. I can say they didn't do enough to deter violence, and in fact, they did downplay a lot of it. They call it the summer of love, the fiery but mostly peaceful. They didn't really do enough to deter it. Meanwhile, they condemned January 6th like it was the new 9/11.
So Trump didn't do enough to deter it, right? So Trump's responsible.
Yeah, he did. He told people. Yeah, he did. He told people not
Well, it
to.
happened- it
We're
happened-
examples of Democrats telling people not to burn down cities.
Biden told him not to.
Okay, well, what about everyone else? The
Whoa!
media,
Yes,
no one
they
else
did.
was like discouraging it.
Yes, they did. These individual governors and mayors and stuff they did. But
Was it a good-
but
was it a-
just to be
so-
clear, but just
so
to be
was it
clear,
a good thing-
just to be clear, did Trump do enough for the Black Lives Matter riots? Yes or no?
Like physically or what? I mean, of course he condemned
As
it.
the president of the United States, as the commander in chief, did he do enough? Yes or no?
Well, he wanted to send in the National Guard, and you
Did he
guys
do
were
enough
like,
for-
no, that's wrong.
Did he do enough?
Well, he didn't, but you guys.
Oh, so he didn't.
No,
do
I don't
enough.
think he did.
So who bears more responsibility? Biden, who was not in office and condemned it, or Trump, who was in office and in your mind didn't do enough?
Wait, say that one more time.
Who's more responsible for the BLM riots? Biden, who condemned the riots, or Trump, who condemned them and in your mind did not do enough?
A lot of Democrats justified the riots, though. They said that this is an expression of what was the line that they went with? It was the
I'm not hearing an answer to the question.
It was an expression that came out.
I asked about two individuals. You remember the two individuals I asked about?
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, I just don't know why. Like I try to answer your questions directly.
So Biden condemned it, but Donald Trump condemned them. But so because Donald Trump didn't send in so what would he have done if he would have sent in the National Guard?
I don't know. You seem to think he didn't do enough. I'm asking you your opinion. You're asking me a question right now.
Did you think Trump do enough? What should have Trump done?
Why are you asking me a question? I asked you a question.
What was the question again?
Come on, man. That feels like bad faith. Are you not listening?
What was the question?
All right. The question was.
No, I'm listening, but my memory and my thoughts,
okay.
they go from one to another. So what's the question?
It happens. So as between Biden and Trump at the time the BLM riots occurred, one who was in power, one who was not in power, and both condemned it, who's more responsible?
Yeah, Trump should have definitely done more to stop it.
Wait,
but again,
Trump,
what do you think he should have done?
Who is more responsible, Trump or Biden?
Are you saying that Trump is advocating for the BLM riots?
I'm not. Wait, I'm just asking a question. I'm just asking a very simple question. Who is
I
more
answered
responsible?
it already. I said Trump didn't do enough.
You said Trump didn't do enough. I'm asking as between Trump and Biden. It's a comparative question, it's a relative question. Trump, Biden. Who is more responsible, Trump or Biden?
Well, I mean, if Trump was in charge, then yeah, it would be by default Trump. But he's not responsible in that he encouraged it or anything. He should have definitely done more.
So under your lights, Trump is more responsible than Biden for what occurred. Trump was in charge at the time of the country, and yet you're all angry about the Democrats and what they did vis-a-vis the Black Lives Matter riots. Explain that for me.
Yeah, gladly. So so Donald Trump, should have absolutely done more to stop it. Bottom line. But you're now trying to insinuate like, well, because Trump didn't do much to stop it, therefore he was like encouraging the BLM riots or something.
No, I'm saying that you were really
I'm
saying like you're really ready and gun ho to say that Democrats encourage violence because they didn't deter it enough. Even though you can't point to explicit calls for violence from Democrats, but your theory was, well, the Democrats didn't do enough to deter it. I present you Donald Trump and I say, hey, look, Trump was in charge, and you just said he didn't do enough to deter it. And in fact, you just said that he's more responsible than Biden at the time. So it doesn't your very same criticism apply to Trump, that Trump encouraged violence by not doing enough to prevent it?
So what did the Democrat governors do then at that time? Did they do anything to try to stop it?
Yes.
Didn't it happen in governor? They did. They tried to stop it.
Yeah, but again, yes. But again, I'm applying your framework. It's a red herring. I'm applying your framework. Your framework was that the Democrats actively encouraged them, and your theory was because they failed to properly deter, and then I give you Trump, and then we do the whole thing over again. And my question is, under your theory that you laid out, didn't Trump also encourage the Black Lives Matter violence? And I think what you would say is, of course he didn't, because he never wanted that to occur. He never did things to make it more likely to occur. And I would say, yeah, therefore the Democrats didn't encourage violence.
No, they absolutely did. They didn't do anything. They encouraged it through the media. They tried to downplay it. They called it the summer of love, fiery but mostly peaceful.
So do you condemn Trump pardoning all the Jan Sixers? So that's encourage violence, right? Because
now you're trying to move it to January. So now you're trying to move it to January 6th because that's your.
Wait a second.
No, peace. No. You can't do that. No. See, I'm trying. See, so here's you coming out. So listen, see, I'm trying to hold your feet to the fire. And listen, the thing is, we all know, and you're trying to gaslight again. The Democrats absolutely didn't discourage any of it.
Did Trump?
Because you're trying to freaking.
Did Trump discourage it?
Yeah, well, I mean, he vocally did. He said it's not right. He said you shouldn't.
Biden vocally
what's
did.
It called? So Biden vocally did. Okay, but what's it called? Was Biden in charge at that time?
No, he wasn't in charge.
Okay, so who cares if he vocally did or not?
I guess you do, because you're saying the Democrats didn't do enough. There were Democratic governors that issued, but the Democratic governors also tried to vocalize against it, and they did. And we can get statements if you don't believe me.
So wait a minute. On one hand, Trump didn't do enough because he didn't, do anything physically to stop it.
You said
but
that.
On one hand,
you said that.
But on the other hand, the governors.
You said that.
The governors, right? They actually did nothing to actually stop it, even though they were in charge. So listen, Trump bad because he didn't physically stop it, right? Fair, I'll give
you said that.
But then
I didn't say that.
But then governors, Democrat governors didn't do enough to stop it. So therefore, then they're just as bad as Trump. Then bada bing, bada boom.
So I'm using it's like an internal critique of your logic. I'm saying your logic that the Democrats encouraged violence.
No. You can't internally. Pisco, you're full of crap. No, you're full of crap.
I can't internally critique you? Why can't I?
No.
I can't test your logic?
I'm talking about the BLM riots, right? Yeah. And then you want to move it to January 6th because that's your guys'
this is before
boogeyman.
That.
That's your one thing.
You soyed out so much
you
when
did.
I tried.
You tried to pivot.
I tried to present that to you when you said the Democrats encouraged it by doing these tangible actions, and then I was going to present to you the January 6th example to see if your standard is the same, and if you're going to say by that logic, by those lights, that Trump encouraged violence on that end. But you soyed out so much and got so triggered that I dialed it back because I didn't want you to be as triggered, and now I'm telling you that I'm applying your logic, and I was also applying your logic in the Jan 6 example. It's an internal critique. That you would never
you
say
try
this.
To switch it over to January 6th because that's your go-to.
Because it's the most obvious example of why your logic is flawed. Your logic is flawed. Your reasoning isn't consistent. There's a contradiction. The contradiction is that you don't actually hold to this principle. You say you hold to this principle, you say you hold to this standard, but you don't actually hold to the standard. And if I were to present you with, Donald Trump doing tangible actions to benefit or show, that he supports or his encouragement with, the people who did something violent, you would never say, oh, therefore he encouraged it, or therefore he's aligned with it. You wouldn't apply that to Trump. Now, I think this whole whataboutism, this whole like kind of double standard hypocrisy talk is boring. I'd rather address the actual First Amendment situation here. I know that everyone deals in whataboutisms all the time, and that's all the language it feels like of MAGA every single day. But why can't we just?
You just did a whataboutism a while ago with January 6th.
Yeah, I'm trying to apply.
You do whataboutisms as well.
I just acknowledge that I'm engaged in this hypocrisy conversation with you, in this testing of standards. I acknowledge
by using whataboutisms.
It's an inherently whataboutist conversation we're having because we're talking about each other's respective standards and if we're being consistent. I'm telling you, I think it's boring, but we can continue to have it if you want. At the end of the day, though, you are critiquing my opinion on the Mahmoud Khalil situation, whether I exist or not as an individual, whether I'm consistent or not. I feel like the arguments should be addressed on their merits instead of, oh, were you consistent? And I think that I was consistent, but were you consistent all the time? I would like to have the First Amendment conversation because I feel like we were getting somewhere before we got into the most triggering topics, those being Hunter Biden, Jan 6, and BLM.
Okay. Do you think it would have been a violation of First Amendment if Donald Trump would have sent the National Guard during the BLM riots?
Just that by itself, no.
Just by itself? Okay. So if he wanted to send in the National Guard, you would have been like, Yeah, I think he should have sent it to the National Guard. I just said that he didn't do enough.
Do you think it would be a violation of the first? Do you think it would be a violation of the First Amendment? Yeah. Okay. So we're agreed.
Okay. So if at the time he was like, I'm going to deploy the National Guard to get these riots under control to stop people from burning down these cities, you would have been like, okay, that's good on Trump.
That wouldn't be enough information for me to make that determination. Just because I know that something is not a First Amendment violation doesn't mean that I think that something is advisable or not advisable. For example, it's Kanye West's First Amendment right to bear a swastika.
Whataboutisms? I thought you were bored of whataboutisms.
Are you serious? It's not a whataboutism. I can explain why it's not if you want.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm not addressing your hypocrisy by putting up a case in front of you. I'm trying to explain my reasoning and why I believe that a mere lack of First Amendment violation is not by itself problematic, enough to prove that something is not, notwithstanding the fact, a problem. So the example I'm giving here is to show you my reasoning. So when you say, oh, you agree it wouldn't be a First Amendment violation, therefore you should support it, I'm giving you an example to maybe help you understand my point of view, which is just because I think it's not a First Amendment violation for Kanye West to wear a certain t-shirt or for Donald Trump to yell at someone doesn't mean that I think that it's still a good idea. So it wouldn't be enough information for you to ask me whether or not, it would violate the First Amendment to deploy the National Guard to know that I'm in favor of it or if I'm against it. I hope that makes sense. And I hope that shows you why it's not whataboutism. Whataboutism would be like, what about you? What about you? What about the fact that you don't do that? That's whataboutism. When I'm just giving you an example of my reasoning, it's not whataboutism.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So when, okay. So I forgot my question now.
Let me get us on track. Why don't you let me get us on track and get to the First Amendment?
Because I actually had a good question because the thing is I said, because at first you said, well, you wouldn't think it was a First Amendment violation if Trump had the National Guard to get the riots under control. But then when I said, okay.
Now, if he ordered them to do something like go close down the New York Times because he didn't like an article, that would be different. I think that you would agree with that the deployment of the National Guard for a specific purpose that's contrary to the First Amendment would be a violation of the First Amendment. I think you would agree with that, right?
Okay, well, I think...
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So when it comes to the BLM riots, so with the riots going on, so you don't have enough information to know if that would have been a good idea if you would have sent the National Guard in.
You're asking my actual opinion about sending the National Guard?
For the BLM riots, yes.
So I was fine with states using their National Guards to address what's going on. What was being advocated for him to do is to take federal control and to invoke the Insurrection Act and take federal control of the National Guard, nationalize the National Guard, and do it that way. So I was fine with governors using their discretion to use their National Guards. National Guard's a dual-rolled entity, so it's under typical control of the state governors. So the states were using their National Guards in many of these instances, and I was fine with states using their own discretion in their own states to do it. I didn't think that it was a good idea for Trump to go and muck about.
Okay. All right. So just to be clear here, because I don't want to misrepresent you. So if a Democrat governor would have said, let's send in the National Guard to get these BLM riots under control, that's good. But if Trump wanted to do it, well, that's bad.
I didn't think it was necessary for Trump to get involved. And so I didn't think that it would be a good idea. I think it would just inflame tensions and make things worse. I didn't think it would make things better. And so I think
why would it have inflamed tensions, though?
That's my intuition. That Trump was not making things more calm.
Your intuition, just how you feel?
No, based on the fact that, for example, when Trump released statements that were perceived as inflammatory and like very up, all of a sudden there was a riot.
Perceived.
Yeah, whether they're
perceived as inflammatory.
Whether they're perceived correctly or incorrectly, when he spoke and when he said stupid shit, when he talked too much like a idiot, shit would pop off and lead to drama. And so I don't think that he's a good judge of these operations. I don't think that it would be wise to put him in charge of what was happening. And I think that if it were done under different stewardship, it probably would have lasted a lot less long. I can't prove that definitively, but that is what my gut tells me.
Yeah, kind of like when, Biden called us the MAGA Republicans extreme and stuff like that. That's not him. That's not a president saying stupid shit. But when Donald Trump says something stupid, then that's worse. That's inflammatory.
Well, you guys will get offended by anything. He shouldn't have sent in the
National Guard. He's not allowed to send in the National Guard because he says stupid shit sometimes.
I didn't say he's not allowed. I just think it probably wasn't.
But
it
would have been perceived as bad. It would have been perceived by you guys as bad because he says stupid shit that you don't like.
No, he also does
him trying to get it under control.
He also
that's
does.
Not good.
He also does stupid shit and some things that I think absolutely do violate the First Amendment. But he also does very stupid things. But is this the conversation you wanted to have about BLM? I mean, like, what is this conversation? We're just like talking about anything.
I listen. It got on the BLM, right? I was fine with talking. If you want to move off, that's fine.
But what is the point? I'm happy to talk about what you want to talk about. I'm just like, what is your ultimate goal? Is your goal to show you're inconsistent about BLM? I don't think I'm inconsistent. I think I'm like reasonably consistent.
I think you're pretty inconsistent. I mean, you're saying if Donald Trump does it, bad. But if the Democrat governors did it, well, it's good. So you are inconsistent.
But I gave you a reason for it, right? If I say, you understand, I gave you reasons.
Matter? It's all about your feelings, though. It's all about your feelings, though. Okay. You just don't like Trump, so it's bad when he does it.
Have you ever had?
But Democrat governors that you do like.
Do you have a wife or girlfriend, or have you ever had a partner? You don't have to answer that. Imagine
I'm married. Okay, I'm married.
Imagine you're like, oh, so you get to f your wife, but Tom doesn't get to f your wife. What? You're being inconsistent? What the? What would you say to that?
I would say that's a stupid analogy.
So
are you married to Joe Biden? Are you married to the Democrats? I mean, that's very telling if that's what this analogy is getting at here.
Do you not understand the analogy? There's a material difference. There's a material difference in you having marital relations with your wife versus some random person having marital relations with your wife. Just like I think there's a material difference between the president invoking the Insurrection Act and nationalizing the National Guard over the states operating over these kind of riots that occurred. And I think the proof of that is in the pudding that Donald Trump didn't invoke the Insurrection Act, and some people give him the benefit of the doubt and say, maybe he had a good reason not to invoke the insurrection and nationalize the National Guard. But you seem to think, oh, it's all the same. And so you're inconsistent if you're okay with one person doing it versus the other. And it's the same thing, by the way, that Trump says, we're in favor of the states handling abortion, not the national government. Are you like, oh, wait a second. So you think some people should do something, but not other people should do something? It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. And you just said it.
Well, no, I think you're just upset because it shows your inconsistencies. I mean, I think it's ridiculous that you're saying, well, Donald Trump didn't do enough to stop it. And I know you're trying to use my logic, but the thing is, though, is that if Donald Trump had tried to do something,
I would
you and all
criticize
the
him.
left would have flipped out. Exactly.
But that's
so
not
you would have
inconsistent.
criticized
It was
him.
an internal critique. I was criticizing your logic of ascribing the Democrats of saying that they are in favor or that they supported or that they encouraged these riots, violence.
And it doesn't really matter, though, because if Trump would have done it, that if he would have done something, he would have sent the National Guard to the to get the BLM riots under control. You would have thrown a big fit out about it, and all the
I'm
other
sure I
lefties
would've.
people would have thrown a big
Wait,
fit
I was
about
throwing
it.
a big fit. I was throwing a big fit.
And
of
he
him.
would have gone.
He sent federal assets to some of these places, and I was criticizing him over that in real time.
Okay.
So what? How does
So,
that affect
I'm just-
our conversation? There's no inconsistency.
Well, yeah, I don't see, because I don't care who gets the BLM rights under control, whether it's the president or it's the governor. I really don't care. I would want to see the buildings not burned down.
So if it was the Proud Boys, would you be okay with that?
Yeah, if the Proud Boys were destroying the cities, yeah, and if Trump sent the National Guard, if that was that big of a problem, he sent the National Guard, yeah, I would be like, yeah, stop it.
What if Trump sent like neo-Nazis to go do it? Literal, like the group neo-Nazis. And he sent them to go do it.
Okay, what if Biden sent Antifa to go stop the riots?
Yeah.
What kind of question is that?
It's to show you that obviously there are some cases where you prefer one organization be in charge or one group of people do something. It's not enough to just be like, oh, well, we all want the job done this one way. There are probably some principles that you adhere to about like proper chain of command, about, you know, the right way to do things, not the wrong way to do things, about maybe potential for collateral damage if things are done the wrong way, you know?
So all I'm getting from this is it just comes down to my TDS syndrome. It's bad when Trump does it because I think he's going to, you know, he's doing everything wrong. He's a big idiot.
Is this real?
He's a fascist. All of these things.
Is this a troll?
Am I wrong, though? Oh, no, it's not a troll. Am I wrong?
You're wrong.
Okay. Why am I wrong?
Because I just gave you all the reasons that I have for why I would prefer one thing over the other.
I know.
So that's not just Trump bad.
It isn't? It kind of sounds like it.
In what way?
I
does
mean,
it
you're
sound
kind of
like it?
going off earlier about how. I mean, earlier you're going off about how Trump says stupid shit and he does all these dumb things. So, okay, you have two people. You have a Democrat governor wants to send in the National Guard, and then you want Donald Trump, and you have Donald Trump wants to send in the National Guard. Two same things. You said it's not good when Trump does it, but it's good when the Democrat governor does it.
I said they're not the same.
Yeah. Okay. Because of Trump bad.
No, because I think the states had it under control. Well, Trump
They
has,
did?
Wait, the states had it under control, yeah. I think they're guards. The National Guard
They
aspect of
did.
it. Yeah.
There is a lot of destruction, dude. Lots of destruction. And
it
so
was,
you're saying that the
hang on.
states actually handled it?
They didn't need the federal government to get involved in those instances. It was going to be painful no matter what because people were going way too far and doing violence and criminal acts. So it was never going to be painless. But in the sense of like the order, I trust the governors to do what they're going to do. And by the way, Trump praised them too. Trump praised Tim Walz. Trump praised these other governors. And so anything you're going to say about me is just I'm just reflecting what Trump was saying at the time.
Oh, wow. So you agree with Trump. That's
I agree with Trump that Tim Walz did a fine job in Minnesota. Do you agree with Trump on that? Yes or no?
I guess, sure. Yeah. I'll say.
Okay, great.
I said, yeah. I said, sure.
My bad. There's a delay. I'm not trying to interrupt you. So I like don't know what's going on right now. Like, I don't know what we're talking about. I don't know what the purpose of this conversation. This conversation has morphed out of my control and out of my comprehension. And so I'm gonna need your help to ground us. What's going on?
I don't know. I guess we got into. I guess because I figured I saw that there's inconsistencies with your viewpoint about if Donald Trump were to see the National Guard versus the Democrat governors. And so I guess I called it out.
Okay, I think I've answered that, but can we so where are we in the grander sense of this conversation? Like what's going on right now? What's the purpose behind all of this? Like, I thought we were going to talk about Mahmoud Khalil.
And we did.
We didn't
and
really
and
resolve anything. We just resolved that you would.
What do you mean?
You would criticize the action if you thought it was based on his based on his expression. I said it very clearly, obviously, is based on his expression, and I don't think that you've conceded that it is.
Well, the thing is, Pisco, it even sounded like you even kind of conceded it's just more basically how you feel it is. And I mean, judging on your opinion on Trump, he says a lot of stupid stuff. He does a lot of dumb things. I mean, it's not out of bounds to assume that you obviously are going to think the worst, that he's doing it to punish his free speech rights.
I mean, do you think that of Tim Pool? Tim Pool has TDS? Because Tim Pool said the same thing.
Tim Pool's a centrist, though, so he's going to go back and forth on a lot of things.
Tim Pool's a centrist in your mind. Tim Pool also in that conversation said that he's picked a side.
Well, I mean, I guess he voted for MAGA, but he's like more like, dude, Tim Pool has a lot of I don't listen to a ton of Tim Pool, but from what I've seen, he says a lot of things that I disagree with and a lot of other Republicans disagree with.
Okay. So he's a centrist, so you don't have to listen to him because he can go both ways on many things.
Well, okay, well, I don't know why we're talking about Tim Pool. You just said, well, Tim Pool agrees with me. Like, okay, who cares?
Because you were like, you have TDS, so of course you're going to interpret it in the worst possible way, which is that he's going after these people because of their First Amendment or because of their speech. I'm telling you, well, you don't think that Tim has TDS, right?
No, I don't think Tim Pool has TDS.
Yeah, and he's agrees with me that he's going after them because of Israel and the opinions on Israel.
Okay. And listen, if they're going, I'll say it before and I'll say it again. If they're going after him purely because of his speech against Israel, I am not for that. I disagree with that.
Okay.
But the thing is that you're also saying, though, like, you have no hardcore proof that's what it is. You're just like, come on, dude, come on. There's no other reason.
Definitely have hardcore proof. Yeah, no. The fact that they're premising it on his quote unquote support of Hamas is his speech activities.
So the allegations are that he's aligned with Hamas. So I guess we're going to go back to this. Isn't Hamas a terrorist organization?
Yeah. Are you allowed to support? Are you allowed to support a terrorist organization in terms of your vocal support? Are you allowed to go down in the street and say, "I love Hamas"?
I actually don't know. Are you?
Are you trolling me? I have to know.
No, I'm being 100% serious because again, that's a terrorist organization. Are you allowed to like vocally align yourself with a terrorist organization? Because isn't that like you might try to recruit others and stuff? So I mean, I'm just saying that like isn't that kind of a little bit of a line there?
No, I don't think that you're allowed. I know that you're allowed to, as a citizen, vocally support reprehensible and terroristic organizations. For example, if you wanted to say, I think Al-Qaeda is great, the First Amendment protects that. Do you not agree?
I'm asking you because again, when it comes to terrorist organization, I legitimately don't know. I'm asking, aren't you a lawyer? Don't you know the law?
I know. Yes. You are definitely allowed to support those organizations in terms of providing independent advocacy for them. It's well known, for example, that you're allowed to march with the KKK, right? KKK for a long time was absolutely a domestic terrorist organization. You're allowed to, express support for Nazis in the country. You're allowed to, all these things you're allowed to do as someone who has First Amendment rights. So, yeah. You don't agree? You don't think you have the First Amendment right to go outside and say, "Hell yeah, we love Hamas"? Of course you can.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, listen. I mean, as long as it's not linked to like they're actively trying to recruit for Hamas or anything like that,
yeah, that's
then
different.
Okay, yeah. If you're just then that's what I wanted to know. I genuinely do not know all the details of the Mahmoud case. So if this is just purely free speech, if this is just purely he's just aligning himself and it's not crossing any lines or anything, then yeah, okay, I agree that it's wrong.
Sick. Well, I think it is about his speech. And I think that...
But you keep saying you think, though. That's the thing, though. You just keep saying you think.
Well, it is that because they told us it's because of his support for Hamas. They've explained the rationale.
Okay, so... Okay. All right.
Boom. I think we agree. And so what's your deal with me? Why do you hate my appearance on Tim Pool?
I don't hate your opinions, dude.
No, appearance on Tim Pool.
Actually...
Why are you talking all kinds of shit about my appearance on Tim Pool if we like baseline kind of agree?
Yeah, so I guess, listen, like, I don't agree with everything, obviously, that you say and whatever, but if it's purely just on the Mahmoud thing, if that's exactly what's going on, because again, I'm just taking your word for it.
Yeah, you're taking my representation. I get
there's
that,
a chance. There's a chance I might go and actually do all the research myself and find, wait a minute, there's some details here that Pisco left out or something like that.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Or that's not being represented. So, yeah, I mean, if that's purely just what's going on, then I guess, the things I said about that case, I guess I take back.
Sick. There are other things we talked about though, so you could be mad at me for other reasons. In that conversation we also talked about insurrection. We talked about the Tim Pool said that he wanted to exile. He's in favor of exiling U.S. citizens. That was weird. Tim Pool said he doesn't care about the Constitution. Good Logic said that Abraham Lincoln was a tyrant. There's a lot of things there for you to chew on. I don't know if you take any other big issues, but I appreciate the conversation for sure. It's been a winding one though.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. No. There was, okay, actually, no, there was something in the video I remember I talked about, and it was the whole Second Amendment thing. What are your thoughts on the Second Amendment? Do you think that we all, I guess I'll just keep it basic. What do you think about the Second Amendment?
Yeah, I think that initially what was meant by the Second Amendment actually was a right as against the federal government, as all the Bill of Rights were meant to apply to the federal government, not the state governments. And so I believe, first, that it did not apply to state government actions, only apply to federal government actions at the founding. I also think that based on the fact that it's in that posture as state versus federal, and because of that first clause regarding militias, I don't believe that it supports the individual right argument under Heller. It's not a very strong opinion on that, I have to admit, because I haven't done deep dive research. That's probably like a 55-45 right now in terms of my confidence level on that. I'm not 100% sold one way or the other because I haven't done deep dive on it. However, my opinion is that the Second Amendment does apply to individuals who are not just citizens. It applies broader than that. That is my opinion based on the language of the Second Amendment, that once it's the case that it's an individual right to own and bear arms, that applies both to non-citizens and to citizens.
Okay. So how can an illegal citizen, how can they go about purchasing a gun legally?
I don't understand why you're asking that. The Second Amendment would define the scope oftentimes of what would be a legal restriction for a non-citizen to have a gun. So to the extent that there were laws that banned non-citizens from owning or possessing weapons, they would have to face some kind of constitutional test that would have to be applied. And so I wouldn't need to show you right now that it's currently legal under our existing law for a non-citizen to possess a weapon, to also have the opinion that it should be. I hope that makes sense. But the answer is also ultimately,
all right.
I don't know. There are some states that don't require, permits, And now there's still federal laws that apply to those states in terms of doing some, checks and that kind of thing sometimes, but there are loopholes. And so there are ways probably under the law to have these individuals possess weapons. I'm not aware of them.
Okay. Yeah, because what if they're in a state that requires the background checks and stuff like that? How can a legal citizen go about purchasing a gun and then go through the background check? I mean, do you think that an illegal citizen will be motivated to buy a firearm legally if they have to go through the background check and show?
You said illegal citizen, illegal immigrant. You mean?
Yeah, an illegal immigrant. If an illegal immigrant wanted to go ahead and purchase a firearm, okay, my question was. Do you think it would motivate them to buy it legally if they had to go through show documentation and background check, or do you think it would motivate them more to buy it off of the black market and own it illegally?
I assume that they would not be incentivized to undergo a legitimate background check if they're here in violation of law. But I don't know why that's relevant to anything we're talking about.
Well, because you said you believe that they should, under the Constitution, be able to purchase a firearm. The thing is, though, is that us as citizens, we still have to go through all these background checks.
I didn't quite say that. I said the Second Amendment applies to them. Now, the Second Amendment...
What does that mean?
Well, it means that, I'm not so sure that maybe there's some reason, maybe there's some Second Amendment jurisprudence that would say if you come here illegally, yes, the Second Amendment applies to you, but we have this test that you have to meet in order to ban guns sales to illegal immigrants, and we think that that regulation, that legislation stands scrutiny because there's a compelling purpose that's narrowly tailored, or whatever the case law test is for the Second Amendment. Now, I'm giving you some legalese right there. All that it is to say is there are some times where you have the Second Amendment right, but there's exceptions to it under regular principles. So, for example, the First Amendment. The First Amendment says that Congress shall not abridge the freedom of speech. However, that does not protect defamation. That does not protect child pornography. That does not protect incitement, okay? So there are holes within these rights that are understood in time and in the history, that when we're talking about the First Amendment, we're talking about the English common law version with some iterations of the first of free speech rights that existed at the time of the framing under this kind of originalist framework that we're all kind of supposed to handle. So all I'm saying is the Second Amendment would need to apply to these individuals. Now, it could be that there could be some restrictions that are placed on illegal immigrants that you can't place on citizens. I haven't said that that's not allowable, but at a bare minimum, the right itself, the protection of the Second Amendment, should apply such that whatever restriction you're going to try to impose on a illegal immigrant with respect to their right to bear arms would have to be funneled and channeled through the doctrines of the courts that apply to individuals who have Second Amendment. So, for example, felons aren't allowed to have, it's constitutional for Congress to ban the possession of guns from felons. It's constitutional for states to prohibit the mentally incapable from possessing weapons. They still have protection of the Second Amendment, but the government just has a really, really, really good reason, and so they apply a test and the law passes, right? The law is signed off on either because historically there's an analog, there's really good evidence that it was never meant to protect this kind of thing. And so all I'm saying is, it's a little complicated, but the Second Amendment applies to you. There could be some laws that are okay, some that are not. Same thing with the First Amendment, by the way. I've never said that the First Amendment in all of its conclusions applies to illegal immigrants and to green card holders. But at a bare minimum, they get the major protections and they get the kind of tests applied to them. Hope that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, no, that does make sense. And I agree with you in terms of the First Amendment and stuff. It's just my whole thing is just, it's when it comes to illegal immigrants owning guns here in this country, again, I would think that they would probably have to own one illegally, or we would have to own one legally. Do you think that's, I don't know, do you think that's fair? Do you defend illegal immigrants' I should go back. Do you think
wait,
that's fair?
wait. So yeah, so what you just said right there, I think is very interesting. I think the Second Amendment protects more than just your right to own guns, right? There are rights to possess them, right? The right to practice with guns, right? The right to maybe, travel with them. It's not just gun ownership. Like, I think it would be quite a limited Second Amendment if all you could do is own the gun, right? So just because I think that there might be some regulations for that illegal immigrants can't own weapons doesn't mean that maybe there's, allowable reasons. Okay, illegal immigrants can't own weapons, but they can go to the firing range with someone who does. Or maybe they can, you know what I'm saying? So I don't need to necessarily say that I'm okay with illegal immigrants owning guns. Maybe there's a good reason for them not to that would pass the Second Amendment test. Now, I kind of doubt it. Here's why I kind of doubt it. The Second Amendment under this court has kind of gotten more protection than other rights. It's kind of crazy how much protection. And they pretty much said that in order to have a restriction pass muster, it needs to have like a historical analog. And because we had an open borders policy until 1870 thereabouts, I think it would be very unlikely for us to have a historical analog that says that immigrants of any kind aren't allowed to have guns, or non-citizens, because for so long, now it could be possible, but for so long, our country was open borders. That's a long answer of way of saying that, I don't really know. I don't really know if I agree with the concept of illegal immigrants owning guns. In general, I think it's probably not a good idea for illegal immigrants to own guns, but whether I think it's a good idea isn't really the question. It's whether or not I think it's legal. And I haven't done enough research to have an opinion, like a smart opinion on that.
Well, I mean, if we're just going by the Constitution, I mean, then yeah, technically we should all be able to just, bear arms and stuff. However, we live under like laws and stuff. And so just by the notion that we have these laws, you're going to have illegal immigrants probably illegally owning guns. And meanwhile, us citizens, we're going to have to go through the legal channels. I mean, we could buy it illegally, but then we'd be breaking the law. And so we would be encouraged to follow the legal channels. Meanwhile, illegal immigrants don't have any incentive to do that. So that kind of raises the question, well, do they really have, like, should they really enjoy like the Second Amendment rights? Because we still have to follow the legal channels.
The Second Amendment is going to define what is and what's not legal, right? In many ways. So like, if I were to tell you there's a law that says you can't own or possess any gun, would you say that we have to follow the laws? You would say, well, no, that law is not. Yeah. No, you wouldn't. You say that law is repugnant. That's not a real law. It violates the Second Amendment. And so we're going to go to court and we're going to get the court to strike it down. And it's not a real law. A law that is in conflict with the Constitution loses. So when you say we still need to comply with the law, yes, but the Constitution defines like what is and what's not the law, and as interpreted by the courts. And if the courts tell us, right, that the Second Amendment is meant to apply to all persons, and that there's no good enough basis or historical analog to deprive illegal immigrants of possessing weapons or guns, then there would be no need to comply with those offending laws, because those laws would be themselves unconstitutional and therefore repugnant, and not like actual laws. They're just like, of no force. I hope that makes sense. Like when you ask,
yeah, but I'm not.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
It's kind of like a first order problem. The first problem you need to resolve is the constitutional issue. Like whether or not we need to follow the laws depends on whether the laws themselves are constitutional. And by implying or suggesting that non-citizens could have, both illegal non-citizens and I guess legal non-citizens, have Second Amendment rights, I'm calling into question any legal restriction that could limit that, because that legal restriction presumably may be unconstitutional. So it's the first order problem is not compliance with the regulations. It's whether or not the regulations comport with the Second Amendment.
Okay, but there's a lot of like gun control laws right now. I mean, here in California, they make it more difficult to own a firearm and stuff. So I'm just saying that, like, you could sit here and say, well, the Constitution. What I get what you're saying is that the Constitution is like the main one, and then all laws kind of go off of that if they're actually enforceable or not.
Yeah,
goes by the Constitution, right?
Yeah.
So But the thing is, there are laws on the books right now that we have to go by. And so I'm not talking about the scenario you brought up where, well, let's say they just decided to have a law where they banned all guns, right?
Yeah.
I'm talking about there's laws right now where I, as a citizen, have to go through, but there's illegal immigrants here that probably wouldn't go through that. And so I'm just saying, like, you could sit here and say, like, yeah, the Constitution, and yes, I would agree, you have a point under the Constitution, but as the laws as they are right now, it's not balanced. It's not fair.
Yeah. Well, if you were to tell me, for example, that people who are non-citizens are more likely to, like, take advantage of other, like, let's say that illegal immigrants are more likely to defame people, or they're more likely to take advantage of their First Amendment rights in ways that are not, like, protected. That wouldn't change whether or not they have those rights, just because they're more likely to, like, offend or betray the right or do something wrong. Like, I assume that there are people who are more likely to, certain classes of people, maybe, let's say the poor or whatever, are more likely to commit violent and criminal acts. But just because that's the case doesn't mean that defines whether or not they have the right to, like, counsel or the right to be confronted with witnesses. So I don't really see the amount and nature of the violations that these individuals or class of individuals do.
But by default, though, they would probably have to break the law in order to obtain a gun.
Again, I think you're putting the cart before the horse. The whole question would be whether or not it would be legal to even have those restrictions on these people, and to the extent that it would be legal to
what
have
about
those
citizens?
Well,
Do you think we should have those restrictions on citizens, though?
Right. So I was about to answer that. So to the extent that those restrictions, let's assume that those restrictions, gun permitting schemes, are constitutional. If they are constitutional, then yes, illegal immigrants would be bound by them just as much as citizens. So there's, and in no case am I going to tell you that illegal immigrants or non-citizens have more rights than Americans. That's never going to be the case. So to the extent that there is a permitting scheme that is legal and constitutional, yes, these people would be bound to comply with them. And their lack of compliance with them would be grounds for potentially a crime. Nothing about that is inconsistent with your observation, probably an accurate observation, which is that they're much less likely to comply with them to the extent that they want a gun because of the obvious implications on their status and whether or not they'll be removed by the government. So just because complying with the statute might be more burdensome we wouldn't expect of illegal immigrants doesn't mean that they still don't have the rights and that they would be forced to comply with the otherwise valid permitting scheme.
So what if I wanted to buy a gun off of the black market, and I'm a citizen, but I didn't want to go through California's all the loopholes they have, and so I just went and bought one off the black market.
Yes, it would be illegal.
How it would be? Wait, what did you say?
It would be illegal to do that, assuming the law is constitutional.
Okay, so now if a legal immigrant is here in California and they don't want to do that because of the implications, and they decide to buy it off the black market, would that be legal or not?
It would be illegal. For the same reason, they're violating the permitting law.
Okay, so then by that reason, then so I guess what I want to know is that, like, do you think gun laws are constitutional or not?
Some are.
Like which ones?
I happen to think that the laws against felons and the mentally incapacitated owning and possessing weapons, I think those are constitutional laws that have well-established precedent in our history and that have been explicitly allowed by the Supreme Court. And so I believe that those laws are constitutional. That's one. That's two examples. Do you want more?
No, that's good.
Do you agree? I mean, we should be able to ban felons from getting guns, right? Yeah.
No, I agree. Yes,
Sick.
I agree.
Sick.
So, yeah, it's just you just made it sound like you would defend like an again, if you had an illegal immigrant who obtained a gun illegally, and then you had a citizen that obtained it illegally, it sounds like you would fight more for the illegal immigrants' rights than you would than a
never
born citizen.
I would always prioritize citizen rights over non-citizen rights.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
You don't agree?
That's good to hear, Pisco. No, dude, I totally agree.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think citizens get more rights. Citizens need to be considered first in this country. Citizens are first in line.
Mm-hmm.
They're full members of the polity. So just because I have compassion for all peoples, and just because I think that the government shouldn't violate due process or other rights with respect to non-citizens, doesn't mean that I think that citizens should be deprioritized, or even more ridiculous, put under non-citizens. That's insane. So yeah, if Trump were doing this with like American students, right, I think you'd be up in arms, right?
Yes.
So the only difference here is I don't think that you're seeing the danger inherent in what Trump is doing. I mean, this is going to be, if he's allowed, let's say that he gets a little carried away, like he's the wont to do. He often does, by the way. And he, for example, he sent over this person who was legally prohibited from removing from the country. This person had applied for a kind of higher standard version of asylum called withholding from removal. This is the guy that was in the news from El Salvador, who they are accusing him of being MS-13, but there's it's very, very thin basis for that. And also, regardless, he was granted withholding of removal by the government, and even Trump admits that this was a mistake. He says it was a mistake, but they'll get carried away and they'll just send people to this super prison in El Salvador, and then we'll never hear from them again. And that to me is scary. And Trump is always willing to do that. He's always willing to bend the rules, to push. And that's why a lot of people like him, because they perceive that as being like willing to fight very hard. But it's very, very dangerous, especially when it gets into the First Amendment. And especially because it feels like a lot of the arguments are very woke, right? Oh, you can't say this anti-Israel speech because it makes our students feel unsafe. Now, that might be true, but that's what people were saying with respect to like safe spaces and watching your language and preferred pronouns, all that stuff in college campuses across the country. And I think you would roll your eyes if immigrants were being deported, valid green card holders were being deported because they used the wrong pronoun, right? You would be up in arms, right?
If that's the case, yes.
Presumably, then, you should be up in arms if a green card holder is being deported because what? They don't like Israel? And you already said that you would, so you do. So, I'm kind of beating a dead horse because we are in agreement on that. But I think that there's a danger there. There's a danger inherent there. And maybe you'll think about it.
Yeah, sure. And listen, by the way, like it's just like, yeah, listen, yeah, I agree. If it's just purely the First Amendment issue, yes, I would agree with shipping him off. I can understand why you're scared. And listen, I can't predict the future. Who knows? Like if he is going to get like tyrannical or even more so. It's just that sometimes it's hard to take because you guys like fearmonger war over everything. You guys want us to be scared of every single thing Trump does, and then you downplay a lot of the things that Democrats have done or gaslight us and tell us that's not what really happened or no. So, listen, sometimes it's just hard to take you seriously.
Yeah.
Like, should I be really scared? You guys have been crying wolf for the last 8 years or so.
I feel like I've been crying wolf and there's a massive wolf tearing my leg off, but I get it. I mean, you guys like the guy.
I understand that's how you feel.
I know that's how I feel, but here we have, I think, some clear cases. The due process stuff is probably the most frightening. Because that would apply to citizens too. Now, you might say that he'll never do it to citizens. That is like send them to El Salvador, and their argument in court is literally, once we send them to El Salvador, the court can't order us to do anything because they can't order us to like get into negotiations with a foreign country, right? Like that's just an overstep. That's what and I almost am sympathetic to that argument, frankly. I'm not sure what the court can do. Maybe they'll come up with something clever, but I feel very uncomfortable with the notion of a court ordering the president to like engage in negotiations with a foreign diplomat. That seems like, I don't think a court would ever step in that way. And so once he realizes that there are loopholes to the court's jurisdictions, and if the courts are the only stopgap into what he's doing, I'm very, very concerned, but we'll see.
I guess we'll see. Yeah.
Hey brother, good call, man. Long call. We can address some of this other stuff at a later date. You know, Burisma stuff, Hunter Biden stuff, more BLM. You know, I'm a sucker for those conversations, and I get I get real into it. So happy to discuss it a future day. But it was great meeting you, and hopefully, we'll talk again someday.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been a pleasure. I found it to be a very constructive conversation. So, thank you for having me on.
Thank you, brother. Peace out.
Yeah, awesome. No problem. Yeah, peace out, man. Have a good one.
Well, what a nice ending, huh, folks?